Admiral Zefkar stood on the bridge of the dreadnought Eternal Dominion, his 6 arms crossed behind his back as he gazed at the blue marble floating in the darkness ahead. Earth, the third planet from a yellow star in what the locals called the solar system. According to the Imperial survey teams, it was inhabited by a primitive species that had barely achieved faster-than-light travel. How disappointing, he muttered through his translator device. Another backwater world to add to the Empire's collection. The Krillian Empire had conquered over 10,000 worlds across the galaxy. Each species they encountered followed the same predictable pattern. First came fear, then desperate resistance, followed by negotiation attempts, and, finally, submission. It was always the same. The Empire's military might was simply too overwhelming for any single world to resist. "Sir," his communications officer called out, "we're receiving multiple transmissions from the planet's surface. They appear to be surrender offers." Zefkar's mandibles clicked in what passed for amusement among his species. "Already? We haven't even fired a shot yet. These humans must be even more cowardly than the Vorthan lizards." The humans had detected their fleet 3 days ago when the Empire's advanced scouts had appeared at the edge of their solar system. 1,000 heavy cruisers, 500 destroyers, and 50 dreadnoughts. It was more than enough firepower to glass an entire planet several times over. "Put their leader through," Zefkar commanded. The main view screen flickered to life, showing a middle-aged human male in what appeared to be military dress. The human's face was calm, almost serene, which struck Zefkar as odd. Most species showed visible signs of terror at this point. "I am General Marcus Chun, representing the United Earth Defense Council," the human said. "I assume you're here to demand our surrender." "How refreshingly direct," Zefkar replied. "Yes, human. Your world is now property of the Krillian Empire. You will cease all military operations, disarm your forces, and prepare for Imperial occupation. Resistance will result in the complete annihilation of your species." General Chun nodded slowly. "I see. And if we comply with your demands, your species will be allowed to continue existing as servants to the Empire. Your resources will be harvested, your population managed, and your culture modified to better serve Imperial needs." The human was quiet for several moments, his eyes distant, as if he were listening to something Zefkar couldn't hear. Finally, Chun looked directly at the camera. "Admiral, I'm afraid we're going to have to decline your generous offer." Zefkar's 4 eyes widened in surprise. In 300 years of conquest, no species had ever flatly refused the Empire's terms without at least attempting to negotiate. "You misunderstand the situation, human. This is not a negotiation. This is a statement of fact. Your world will fall, with or without your cooperation." "Oh, I understand perfectly," Chun replied. "You see, Admiral, you made a fundamental error in your assessment of humanity. You've assumed we're like every other species you've encountered. But there's something you should know about humans that your scouts apparently fail to mention." "And what is that?" Chen's expression hardened, and for the first time, Zefkar saw something in the human's eyes that made his blood run cold. It wasn't fear or desperation. It was the look of a predator that had just been cornered. "We don't surrender, Admiral. We never have, and we never will. And when someone threatens our home, our families, our way of life." Chun paused, his voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried more menace than any roar. "We become something your empire has never encountered before." The transmission cut out, leaving Zefkar staring at a blank screen. Around him, his bridge crew exchanged nervous glances. In all their years of conquest, they had never encountered such defiance from a technologically inferior species. "Sir," his tactical officer reported, "we're detecting massive energy signatures from across the planet's surface. It appears they're powering up some kind of defensive systems." Zefkar's mandibles clicked in irritation. Defensive systems? What could these primitives possibly have that could threaten the Imperial fleet? "Unknown, sir. But the energy readings are unusual, unlike anything in our databases." On his command console, warning lights began flashing as proximity alarms sounded throughout the ship. Zefkar's sensor operator's voice cracked with confusion. Admiral, we have multiple contacts appearing throughout the system. They just materialized out of nowhere. The main tactical display updated, showing the Imperial fleet's position relative to Earth. What Zefkar saw made his four hearts skip a beat. Surrounding his massive armada were thousands upon thousands of human vessels. They hadn't been there moments ago, yet now they filled the space around his fleet like a swarm of angry insects. How is this possible? He demanded. Our sensors showed no signs of a human fleet. Sir, his science officer called out, her voice trembling. These ships, they're not using conventional propulsion. The energy signatures suggest some form of instantaneous transportation technology. Zefkar studied the tactical display more carefully. The human ships were smaller than his vessels, but there were so many of them, and their design was unlike anything in the Imperial database. Sleek, predatory-looking craft that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Sir, incoming transmission from the human fleet. Put it through. General Chen's face appeared on screen again, but now he was clearly aboard one of the human warships. Behind him, Zefkar could see a bridge filled with humans working at stations with technology that looked decades ahead of what the scouts had reported. Admiral Zefkar, Chen began, allow me to properly introduce ourselves. What you're seeing around you is the Earth Defense Force. Every ship you see is crewed by humans who have volunteered to defend their home world. We number approximately 50,000 vessels. Zefkar's tactical officer whispered urgently in his ear. Sir, that's 25 times the size of our fleet. Impossible, Zefkar growled. Our intelligence reports indicated this species had barely achieved interstellar flight. Where did these ships come from? Chen smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. That's the first thing you need to understand about humanity, Admiral. We've been watching you. Your empire, your conquest methods, your technology. We've been studying you for over 50 years, ever since our deep space monitoring stations detected your expansion into this sector of the galaxy. The Admiral felt a chill run down his spine. 50 years? But our scouts only detected your radio signals 20 years ago. Your scouts detected what we wanted them to detect, Admiral. Did you really think a species capable of monitoring Imperial communications across half the galaxy would be foolish enough to broadcast our true capabilities? Zefkar's mind raced. Everything they knew about humanity, everything their intelligence services had gathered, had been deliberately fed to them by the humans themselves. They had walked into a trap. You see, Chun continued, while your empire was busy conquering primitive worlds, humanity was preparing for the day you would inevitably come for us. We studied every species you defeated, analyzed every battle you fought, and learned from every mistake your victims made. On the tactical display, the human ships began moving into formation. Complex patterns that Zefkar's military mind recognized as advanced battle formations, but executed with a precision he had never seen before. And what did we learn, Admiral? We learned that your empire's greatest weakness is your arrogance. You believe that superior numbers and firepower guarantee victory. But you've never faced an enemy that was prepared for you. Warning klaxons began blaring throughout the Imperial fleet as the human ships powered up weapon systems. Energy readings that defied explanation flooded the sensors. Admiral, his weapons officer reported, the humans are charging weapons. Energy output is, Sir, these readings can't be correct. Some of these ships are generating more power than our dreadnoughts. Zefkar stared at the display in growing horror. Each human vessel was small enough that a single Imperial cruiser should be able to destroy dozens of them. But the energy signatures suggested that wasn't going to be the case. 60% of your ships are powered by fusion reactors, Chun said, as if reading Zefkar's thoughts. 35% use antimatter containment systems. The remaining 5% of your fleet uses something your databases call exotic matter manipulation. Impressive technology for most species. The human general paused, his smile widening. Unfortunately for you, 100% of our fleet is powered by controlled singularities. The words hit Zefkar like a physical blow. Controlled singularities were theoretical technology that the Empire's greatest scientists believed to be impossible. The energy requirements alone should have been beyond any species' capability. Each of our ships, Chen continued, contains a miniaturized black hole held in perfect stasis and used to generate power. It took us 40 years to perfect the technology, but the results speak for themselves. On his sensors, Zefkar could see the truth of the humans' words. Each ship in the human fleet was generating energy levels that should have torn them apart. Instead, they hung in space like sleeping gods, waiting to unleash destruction beyond imagination. But that's not the worst part, Admiral, Chun said, his voice dropping to that same terrifying whisper. The worst part is what we learned about your species specifically. What do you mean? Zefkar managed to ask. Your empire rules through fear. Your species evolved as persistent predators on a high-gravity world, which gave you incredible physical strength and endurance. But it also made you naturally cautious. You only fight battles you know you can win. You've never had to face true adversity. Chun leaned forward in his chair, his eyes boring into Zefkar's through the viewscreen. Humanity evolved differently, Admiral. We didn't develop on a safe world where we were the apex predators. We clawed our way to the top of the food chain on a planet that tried to kill us every single day. We learned to fight impossible odds, not because we wanted to, but because extinction was the only alternative. The human fleet continued its intricate dance around the Imperial Armada, and Zefkar realized with growing dread that they were being surrounded in 3 dimensions. The humans weren't just positioning their ships randomly. They were creating a perfect sphere of destruction with the Imperial fleet trapped at its center. You want to know the difference between your empire and humanity, Admiral? Your species sees war as a tool of conquest. We see it as a tool of survival. You fight to expand your territory. We fight because the alternative is the death of everything we hold sacred. Chun stood up from his command chair, and Zefkar could see the bridge crew around him. Every human face he could see showed the same expression. Not anger, not hatred, but absolute, unwavering determination. You've made the mistake of threatening Earth, Admiral. Our home, our families, our children. And now you're going to learn why every species in this galaxy that has fought humanity for survival has either become our ally or ceased to exist entirely. The tactical display showed the human fleet reaching optimal firing positions. 50,000 ships, each one capable of destroying multiple Imperial vessels, all focused on the Krillian force. Sir, Zefkar's communications officer called out desperately. We're receiving transmission requests from over 3,000 Imperial ships. The crews are requesting permission to withdraw. For the first time in his 300-year military career, Admiral Zefkar felt true fear. Not the tactical concern of a difficult battle, but the primal terror of prey that suddenly realizes it's being stalked by an apex predator. General Chun, he said, his voice barely steady, surely we can reach some form of agreement. The Empire is always willing to negotiate with worthy opponents. Chen's laugh was like ice cracking on a winter lake. Negotiate? Admiral, you came to my home with the largest invasion fleet in galactic history and demanded our surrender. You threatened to destroy every human man, woman, and child if we resisted. The human's expression hardened into something that belonged on the face of an avenging angel. There are no negotiations, Admiral. There's only this: you leave our space immediately, and you never come back. You tell your empire that Earth is off limits. You spread the word to every species in the galaxy that humanity is not to be threatened, conquered, or enslaved. And if we refuse, Zefkar asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. Chen's smile returned, cold and terrible. Then we demonstrate to the galaxy why threatening humanity's home was the last mistake your empire will ever make. The transmission ended, leaving Zefkar alone with his thoughts and the impossible tactical situation surrounding his fleet. Around him, His officers waited for orders that he wasn't sure he was qualified to give. Outside, 50,000 human warships hung in the darkness like instruments of divine judgment, each one capable of channeling the power of a star. And somewhere on the blue world below, an entire species prepared to fight a battle that would determine whether humanity's light continued to shine in the galaxy or was extinguished forever by Imperial conquest. Admiral Zefkar closed his 4 eyes and tried to think of a way out of the trap that humanity had spent 50 years preparing for him. Admiral Zefkar's bridge had fallen into tense silence. The only sounds were the quiet hum of life support systems and the occasional beep from monitoring stations. Every officer present had served in dozens of Imperial conquests, but none had ever faced a situation like this. Status report. Zefkar commanded, his voice carefully controlled. Sir, his tactical officer began, the human fleet maintains their positions around us. Our battle computers are having difficulty calculating effective firing solutions due to the unusual energy signatures of their ships. What do you mean, unusual? The singularity power sources are creating gravitational distortions around each vessel. Our targeting systems are designed to track conventional ships, not ones that are literally bending space-time around themselves. Zefkar studied the 3-dimensional tactical display floating above his command station. The human ships moved with a fluid grace that defied everything he knew about space combat. Traditional naval tactics assumed that larger, more heavily armed vessels would have advantages in mobility and firepower. But these human craft seemed to dance around his massive dreadnoughts like fighters, despite being comparable in size to Imperial cruisers. Sir, his communications officer interrupted, we're receiving a priority transmission from the Imperial High Command on Krillos Prime. Put Supreme Admiral Vexhala through. The massive form of the Empire's Supreme Military Commander materialized in holographic form above the bridge. Supreme Admiral Vexhala was a veteran of 500 conquest campaigns, her scarred carapace bearing the marks of countless battles. Admiral Zefkar, she began without preamble, explain why your fleet has not yet secured the human homeworld. Intelligence reports indicated this would be a routine pacification operation. Zefkar felt his subordinate officers' eyes upon him. How could he possibly explain that the Empire's intelligence network had been compromised for decades? That humanity had been manipulating Imperial perceptions from the beginning? Supreme Admiral, the situation has developed complications. The humans were more prepared than our initial assessments indicated. Prepared. Vexhala's voice carried the edge of barely controlled anger. They are a single-world species with limited technological capabilities. Are you telling me that your fleet of 1,500 vessels cannot handle one primitive planet? Ma'am, they have fielded a defensive fleet of 50,000 ships. The silence that followed stretched for long seconds. Finally, Vexhala spoke again, her voice dangerously quiet. Did you just tell me that a species our intelligence rated as minimal threat has produced a fleet 3 times larger than the force we sent to conquer them? Yes, ma'am. Furthermore, their technological capabilities appear to have been significantly underestimated. Their ships are powered by controlled singularities and are demonstrating energy output levels that exceed our dreadnoughts. Vexhala's image flickered as the transmission quality degraded due to the gravitational distortions around Zefkar's ship. When it stabilized, her expression had changed from anger to something approaching concern. Admiral, are you certain of this assessment? Controlled singularity technology is theoretical even for our most advanced research divisions. I'm watching the sensor readings myself, Supreme Admiral. The energy signatures are unmistakable. Then, we have a problem, Vexhala said slowly. If humanity has developed technology this advanced, they represent a threat to the Empire itself. You're ordered to destroy their fleet and their homeworld. We cannot allow this technology to spread to other resistant species. Zefkar felt his heart sink. Ma'am, with respect, I don't believe our current force level is sufficient for that mission. Then you will hold position and await reinforcements. I am dispatching the 3rd Imperial Fleet to your location. 2,000 additional vessels should provide adequate firepower to deal with these humans." The transmission ended, leaving Zefkar staring at empty air. Around him, his bridge crew processed what they had just heard. The Empire's response to an unexpected threat was always the same: apply more force until the problem was eliminated. "Sir," his sensor operator called out, "the human fleet is moving." On the tactical display, the sphere of human ships began to shift. Instead of maintaining their encirclement, they were pulling back, creating distance between themselves and the Imperial fleet. But they weren't retreating. If anything, their formation was becoming more complex, with ships moving in patterns that seemed almost organic. "What are they doing?" Zefkar muttered. His question was answered when General Chin's image appeared on the main screen again. "Admiral, I couldn't help but overhear your conversation with your superior. It seems the Empire has decided to escalate this situation." Zefkar's eyes widened. "You intercepted our communication with High Command? That's impossible. Our transmissions use quantum encryption." Chin smiled that same cold smile. "Admiral, I thought we had established that your assumptions about our capabilities have been consistently wrong. Did you really think we would engage your fleet without first ensuring we could monitor your communications?" The implications hit Zefkar like a physical blow. If humanity could break Imperial encryption protocols, then they had been listening to everything. Every order, every strategy session, every tactical discussion. The Empire's most closely guarded secrets were completely compromised. "How long?" he asked weakly. "How long have we been listening?" "About 30 years, give or take." It was actually quite educational. "We learned about your supply lines, your fleet deployments, your technological limitations, and your standard conquest procedures. Most importantly, we learned about your reinforcement protocols." Chen leaned back in his command chair, his expression becoming almost conversational. "You see, Admiral, when facing a larger opponent, the key is to avoid letting them use their full strength against you. Your Empire's standard response to unexpected resistance is to call for reinforcements. More ships, more firepower, more overwhelming force. It's predictable, which makes it manageable." "What do you mean, manageable?" Instead of answering directly, Chen gestured to someone off-screen. "Dr. Sarah Martinez, our Chief of Defensive Operations, would like a word with you." A new figure appeared beside Chen on the view screen. Dr. Martinez was a small, elderly human woman who looked more like someone's grandmother than a military strategist. When she spoke, her voice was gentle and warm, which somehow made her words even more terrifying. "Hello, Admiral. I've been studying your Empire's military doctrine for the better part of my career. Quite fascinating, really. You've developed the most efficient conquest machine in galactic history, but efficiency creates predictability, and predictability creates vulnerability." "What vulnerability?" Zefkar demanded. "Your logistics networks," Dr. Martinez replied simply. "To maintain your rate of expansion, the Empire requires constant supply shipments from conquered worlds to staging areas to active fleets. Raw materials, manufactured goods, food supplies, replacement parts, fuel, everything needed to keep 1,500 different conquest fleets operational across the galaxy." She pulled up what appeared to be a three-dimensional map of local space, with glowing lines connecting various star systems. Now, most species never think to attack these supply lines because they're focused on the immediate threat of your invasion fleets. But we've had 50 years to map your entire logistics network in this sector of the galaxy. Zefkar stared at the display, realizing what he was seeing. The lines represented supply routes, and there were hundreds of them. If even a fraction of those routes were disrupted, every supply convoy that has passed through this region for the past 6 months has been shadowed by our long-range reconnaissance ships. Dr. Martinez continued. "We know the exact location of every depot, every staging area, every fuel dump, and every manufacturing facility that supports Imperial operations in this part of the galaxy." "You're bluffing," Zefkar said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Admiral," General Chin said, "Dr. Martinez, Would you please show our guest the results of Operation Lifeline? The display changed, showing a real-time tactical overview of dozens of star systems. As Zefkar watched in growing horror, red indicators began appearing throughout the map. Each red indicator represented a supply convoy or depot that had just been attacked. In the past 30 minutes, Dr. Martinez explained calmly, we have simultaneously struck 437 Imperial logistics targets across 47 star systems. Every supply convoy en route to Imperial fleets in this sector has been destroyed or captured. Every fuel depot within 50 light-years has been eliminated. Every manufacturing facility producing replacement parts for your ships has been reduced to scrap metal. Zefkar felt his legs weaken. Impossible. How could you coordinate attacks across such a wide area? The same way we surrounded your fleet without you detecting our approach, Chen replied. Instantaneous communication and transportation technology. While your reinforcements are traveling here through hyperspace, our strike teams are already at their targets. The tactical display updated again, showing new data. Imperial fleets throughout the sector were reporting massive supply shortages. Ships were running low on fuel, ammunition, and replacement parts. Several fleets had been forced to abandon their current operations to search for alternate supply sources. The Third Imperial Fleet that your Supreme Admiral is sending to reinforce you, Dr. Martinez said, consulting a data tablet, consists of 2,000 vessels, approximately 4 million personnel, and enough supplies to sustain operations for 30 days at normal consumption rates. However, since all their supply depots have been eliminated, they'll be operating entirely on internal stores. She looked up from her tablet with that same grandmotherly smile. At current consumption rates, accounting for the energy requirements of extended space combat, they'll run out of supplies in approximately 8 days. After that, their ships will begin suffering system failures, their crews will go hungry, and their combat effectiveness will drop to near zero. Zefkar's mind raced through the implications. Without supplies, Imperial fleets were just expensive clusters of metal floating in space. The Empire's greatest strength, its ability to maintain multiple large fleets across the galaxy, had been turned into its greatest weakness. But that's not even the best part, Chun said, his expression becoming predatory again. The best part is what happens next. What do you mean? Your empire has 43 different fleets currently engaged in active conquest operations across the galaxy. Every one of them depends on the supply network we just destroyed. Within the next 72 hours, every Imperial fleet in this sector will be forced to withdraw to the nearest major Imperial base to resupply. Chun stood up from his command chair and walked closer to the view screen. That means 43 different species that are currently under attack by your empire are about to get a reprieve. 43 species that will have time to analyze the weapons and technology we're about to share with them. 43 species that will learn how humanity defeated the invincible Imperial fleet. The full scope of humanity's strategy was becoming clear to Zefkar. This wasn't just about defending Earth. It was about crippling the Empire's expansion and creating a coalition of resistant species. You see, Admiral, the Empire's greatest weakness isn't military or technological. It's philosophical. You believe that conquest is inevitable, that resistance is futile, that superior force always wins. But you've never faced an enemy that refused to accept those rules. Dr. Martinez spoke up again. We've been in contact with representatives from over 30 species that are currently resisting Imperial conquest. In approximately 6 hours, they'll begin receiving technical specifications for singularity power systems, instantaneous transportation technology, and advanced weapon systems. All the technology they need to turn their resistance movements into genuine threats to Imperial dominance. Zefkar felt the universe shifting around him. Everything the Empire had built, everything they had conquered, was based on maintaining technological and military superiority over individual species. If humanity started sharing their advanced technology, the galaxy is about to change, Admiral, Chen said quietly. The age of Imperial expansion is ending. But how it ends depends on the choices you make in the next few minutes. What choices? You can order your fleet to attack us. You'll lose, of course. Our technology is too advanced, our numbers too great, and our position too strong. But you'll take some of us with you, and your death will give the Empire justification to continue this war. Chen paused, his expression becoming deadly serious. Or you could be the first Imperial Admiral in history to make the intelligent choice. You can withdraw your fleet, return to Imperial space, and tell your Supreme Admiral exactly what you've learned here. You can help the Empire understand that the old ways of conquest and domination are finished. And if I choose the second option, then you live to see tomorrow, Admiral. And maybe, just maybe, your Empire learns to coexist with the rest of the galaxy instead of trying to conquer it. Zefkar looked around his bridge, seeing his officers waiting for his decision. Outside, 50,000 human warships hung in space like the sword of an angry god. In the distance, his sensors could detect the energy signatures of human strike teams systematically dismantling the Empire's logistics network. For the first time in 300 years of military service, Admiral Zefkar faced a choice that could determine the fate of the entire galaxy. The bridge of the Eternal Dominion remained frozen in tense silence as Admiral Zefkar weighed his options. 3 centuries of Imperial conditioning told him to fight, to maintain the honor of the fleet, to never surrender to an inferior species. But the tactical reality before him suggested that every assumption underlying that conditioning was fundamentally flawed. Admiral, his weapons officer called out softly, long-range sensors are detecting the approach of the Third Imperial Fleet. ETA approximately 18 hours. Zefkar nodded slowly. Supreme Admiral Vexhala's reinforcements were coming, but based on what the humans had revealed about their supply line attacks, those ships would arrive already crippled by logistical shortages. Sir, his communications officer added, we're also receiving emergency transmissions from Imperial command stations throughout the sector. All report coordinated attacks on supply depots and convoy routes. How many facilities have been hit? Current count is over 600, sir. The attacks are ongoing. General Chen's voice cut through the bridge's tension. Admiral, I can see you're processing the information we've shared. While you're considering your options, there's something else you should know. Zefkar looked up at the view screen, where Chen's image waited patiently. What now, General? The attacks on your supply network? That's just the beginning. You see, we've learned something interesting about Imperial psychology over the past 50 years of observation. Dr. Martinez appeared beside Chen again, her tablet displaying new data. Your species, the Krillians, evolved as persistence predators, she began in her scholarly tone. You're naturally patient, methodical, and conservative in your approach to conflict. But the empire you've built includes over 200 different species, each with their own evolutionary psychology. The display changed to show a breakdown of Imperial fleet compositions by species. 30% of your military forces are recruited from naturally aggressive species. Another 20% come from territorial species with strong defensive instincts. 15% are from species that view warfare as a form of social competition. Dr. Martinez looked up from her tablet. What do you think happens, Admiral, when you mix all those different psychological profiles together and then suddenly remove the steady supply of resources that keeps them comfortable and well-fed? The implications hit Zefkar like a cold wind. The Empire's strength lay in its diversity, but that same diversity became a weakness when resources became scarce. Different species had different responses to stress and deprivation. You're suggesting that supply shortages will create internal conflicts within Imperial forces. We're not suggesting it, Admiral, Chen replied. We're observing it in real time. The main display shifted to show intercepted communications from Imperial fleets across the sector. Audio feeds played fragments of heated arguments between different species serving aboard the same ships. Reports of minor confrontations over resource allocation. Requests for emergency reassignment away from mixed-species vessels. The Zaxthari contingent aboard the Dreadnought Conquest's Edge has barricaded themselves in the armory after a dispute over food rations, Dr. Martinez read from her tablet. The Vorthack Destroyer Death Shadow has changed course to search for supply sources, abandoning their assigned patrol route. 3 different Imperial cruisers have reported requests for emergency mediation of interspecies crew conflicts. Zefkar felt his heart sinking as he listened to the reports. The Empire's military machine was beginning to fracture along species lines. "This is just the beginning," Chin said. "As the supply shortages worsen, these minor conflicts will escalate. Species with naturally aggressive tendencies will begin viewing other species as competitors for limited resources. Territorial species will start claiming sections of ships as their exclusive domain. And the naturally competitive species will begin seeing this as an opportunity to prove their superiority over their shipmates." Dr. Martinez consulted her tablet again. "Based on our psychological profiles of Imperial military demographics, we estimate that effective combat cohesion will break down completely within 72 hours of supply shortages reaching critical levels. But there's something else you should know, Admiral," Chun continued. "While your empire is dealing with internal conflicts and supply shortages, we've been busy making friends." The display changed again, showing communication links connecting Earth to dozens of star systems across the galaxy. 36 species currently under Imperial attack, Chen explained. "We've established diplomatic contact with all of them. In the next few hours, they'll receive complete technical specifications for our defensive technologies. Singularity power systems, instantaneous transportation, advanced weapons platforms, everything they need to turn their resistance movements into genuine military threats." Zefkar studied the galactic map with growing dread. If even half of those species successfully implemented human technology, the Empire would face resistance on dozens of fronts simultaneously. "That's still not the worst part," Dr. Martinez added cheerfully. "The worst part is what we've learned about the Empire's expansion strategy." "What do you mean?" "Your conquest methodology relies on preventing your victims from communicating with each other," she explained. "Each species you attack believes they're facing the Empire alone. They have no idea that dozens of other species are simultaneously fighting the same battle." Shin picked up the explanation. "But we've changed that dynamic, Admiral. As of 6 hours ago, all 36 species under Imperial attack are now in constant communication with each other. They're sharing tactical data, coordinating resistance strategies, and learning from each other's successes and failures." The galactic map updated to show communication networks connecting the various resistance movements. What had been isolated pockets of defiance were rapidly becoming a coordinated coalition. "For the first time in Imperial history," Chun said, "your enemies are working together instead of fighting alone." Zefkar's senior staff exchanged worried glances around the bridge. The Admiral could see the fear in their eyes as they processed the magnitude of what humanity had accomplished. "Furthermore," Dr. Martinez continued, "we've also been in contact with 17 species that were conquered by the Empire within the past 50 years. Species that still have underground resistance movements, populations that remember freedom, and leaders who are willing to fight for independence." "You're talking about rebellion," Zefkar said quietly. "We're talking about liberation, Admiral," Chun corrected. "The Empire has grown too large, too diverse, and too dependent on constant expansion to maintain control when faced with coordinated resistance. Your logistical network is compromised, your military forces are beginning to fracture along species lines, and your enemies are now working together instead of fighting separately." The Admiral closed his eyes and tried to calculate the mathematics of the situation. Even if the Empire could somehow resolve the supply crisis and restore military cohesion, they would still face the prospect of fighting 53 different species simultaneously. Species that now had access to technology superior to Imperial standards. "Sir," his tactical officer interrupted, "we're receiving priority communications from Imperial High Command. Multiple fleets are reporting emergency situations." "Put it through." Supreme Admiral Vexhala's holographic image materialized again, but This time her usually composed demeanor showed signs of strain. "Admiral Zefkar, what is your current status?" "Unchanged, Supreme Admiral. The human fleet maintains their positions around us." "Then, explain to me how a single species defending one world has managed to coordinate simultaneous attacks on Imperial facilities across 47 star systems." Zefkar felt the weight of his entire career pressing down on him. How could he explain that the Empire's intelligence apparatus had been completely compromised, that humanity had been planning this operation for decades? "Ma'am, the humans appear to have capabilities that our intelligence networks failed to detect." "Failed to detect?" Vexhala's voice rose dangerously. "Admiral, I am receiving reports of supply depot attacks from sectors that are hundreds of light years away from your current position. Are you telling me that these humans have faster-than-light transportation technology?" "Yes, ma'am. They appear to have instantaneous transportation capabilities." The silence that followed stretched for long seconds. When Vexhala spoke again, her voice was carefully controlled. "Admiral, I am declaring a sector-wide military emergency. All Imperial fleets are ordered to assume defensive postures around their assigned territories. No further offensive operations are authorized until this situation is resolved." Zefkar felt a spark of hope. If the Empire was shifting to defensive operations, perhaps there was still time to prevent this conflict from escalating further. "Ma'am, the humans have indicated a willingness to negotiate." "Negotiate?" Vexhala's image flickered with static. "The Empire does not negotiate with rebellious species, Admiral. We are preparing a comprehensive military response." "Supreme Admiral, with respect, I believe a military response may not be advisable at this time. The humans have demonstrated technological capabilities that exceed our own, and they have established contact with multiple resistance movements throughout the Empire." "Then, we will crush them all," Vexhala replied. "I am mobilizing every available fleet in the Empire. We will gather our forces and eliminate this threat once and for all." The transmission ended, leaving Zefkar staring at empty air. Around him, his bridge crew processed what they had just heard. The Empire's leadership was preparing for total war against an enemy that had already demonstrated the ability to cripple Imperial operations across multiple sectors. "Admiral," General Chen's voice drew his attention back to the view screen. "I take it your superiors have chosen the path of escalation." Supreme Admiral Vexhala is mobilizing additional fleets to deal with what she perceives as a galactic rebellion. Chen nodded slowly. "I was afraid of that. You see, Admiral, we were hoping that Imperial leadership would be rational enough to recognize when they were outmatched. But we prepared for the possibility that arrogance would override wisdom." Dr. Martinez appeared on screen again, this time looking somewhat sad. "Admiral, do you know how many star systems the Empire currently controls?" "Approximately 12,000 worlds across 800 star systems." "And do you know how many of those systems still have indigenous populations that remember life before Imperial conquest?" Zefkar felt a chill run down his spine. "I don't have exact figures." "We do," Dr. Martinez replied. 637 systems still have significant populations of conquered species. Species with their own languages, cultures, and memories of independence. Species that have been waiting for an opportunity to reclaim their freedom. Chen leaned forward in his command chair. "Admiral, what do you think happens when all 637 of those populations simultaneously receive advanced military technology and coordinate their liberation movements?" The full scope of humanity's strategy was becoming clear. This wasn't just about defending Earth or even creating a coalition of resistant species. This was about triggering a galaxy-wide revolution that would tear the Empire apart from within. "You're planning to destroy the Empire entirely," Zefkar said. "No, admitted," Chen replied quietly. "We're planning to free the galaxy. The Empire's destruction is simply a side effect of liberation." On his tactical display, Zefkar could see new contacts appearing throughout local space. More human ships were arriving, but these vessels were different. Larger, more heavily armed, and radiating energy signatures that defied his understanding of physics. "Admiral," his sensor operator called out, "we're detecting massive energy buildup from the human fleet. Whatever they're preparing to do, it's going to require enormous amounts of power." Chin's expression became deadly serious. "Admiral Zefkar, you have approximately 30 minutes to make a decision that will determine the fate of your fleet, your crew, and possibly your entire species." "What decision?" "You can maintain your current position and wait for your reinforcements to arrive. When they do, we'll destroy them along with your current fleet, and the Empire will lose over 3,500 vessels and roughly 18 million personnel in a single battle. That loss will trigger the full-scale mobilization your Supreme Admiral is planning, which will lead to a galactic war that will destroy the Empire and cost billions of lives." Chin paused, his eyes boring into Zefkar's through the view screen. "Or you can order your fleet to withdraw from this system immediately, return to Imperial space, and convince your leadership that continuing this conflict will result in the complete annihilation of everything the Empire has built over the past 1,000 years. And if I choose withdrawal, then your fleet lives to see another day, Admiral. And maybe, just maybe, we can find a way to end this without drowning the galaxy in blood." Admiral Zefkar looked around his bridge one more time, seeing his officers waiting for the order that would determine their fate. Outside, the human fleet continued its ominous preparations, building towards some demonstration of power that would prove humanity's superiority once and for all. Time was running out, and the future of the galaxy hung in the balance. Admiral Zefkar stood motionless on his command bridge, feeling the weight of 3 centuries of Imperial tradition pressing against the cold logic of tactical reality. Around him, his senior staff waited for orders that could determine whether they lived to see another day or died as symbols of Imperial might. "Time remaining?" he asked quietly. 26 minutes until the human deadline, sir," his chronometer officer replied. "Status of the approaching Third Fleet? 17 hours until arrival, Admiral. However, we're receiving fragmentary communications suggesting they're experiencing supply shortages consistent with the humans' claims about infrastructure attacks." Zipkar nodded grimly. Even if reinforcements arrived on schedule, they would arrive weakened and unprepared for the kind of warfare humanity was demonstrating. Worse, their arrival would trigger the demonstration of power that General Chun had promised. "Sir," his communications officer called out urgently, "we're receiving emergency transmissions from across the sector. Imperial fleets are reporting coordinated attacks by previously unknown forces." "Put the reports through." The main display filled with fragmented communications from Imperial vessels throughout local space. Admiral Zefkar listened with growing horror as fleet after fleet reported encounters with ships using technology identical to the human vessels surrounding his own force. The cruiser Imperial Glory reports engagement with 20 hostile vessels of unknown configuration. Enemy ships demonstrate instantaneous movement capabilities and energy weapons that penetrated our shields in seconds. "Admiral, this is Fleet Captain Mordeck of the Conquest Eternal. My task force is under attack by forces using what appear to be controlled singularity weapons. We've lost 4 destroyers and 2 cruisers. Requesting immediate assistance. Command, this is the Dreadnought Sector Ruler. We are being overwhelmed by hostile forces that appeared without warning. Their technology appears to be decades ahead of Imperial standards. We are attempting to withdraw." The reports continued for several minutes, painting a picture of Imperial forces under assault across dozens of star systems. Every attacking fleet demonstrated the same technological advantages that the human ships surrounding Zefkar's force possessed. "General Chin," Zefkar called out to the view screen, "are these attacks being carried out by your forces?" Chin's expression was carefully neutral. "Some of them, Admiral, but not all. You see, while we've been talking, several of the species we've been in contact with have successfully implemented our technology transfers. The attacks you're hearing about represent the first coordinated counteroffensive against Imperial expansion in galactic history." Dr. Martinez appeared beside Chun, consulting her ever-present tablet. 31 different species are currently engaging Imperial forces using human-supplied technology. Another 14 species are preparing to launch their own operations within the next few hours. "This is impossible," Zefkar muttered. "It takes years to understand and implement new technology. You can't simply hand over advanced systems and expect other species to master them in hours." "Under normal circumstances, you'd be correct," Dr. Martinez replied with her grandmotherly smile. "But we didn't just provide them with technology, Admiral. We provided them with artificial intelligence systems capable of operating the equipment until their personnel can be properly trained." Chen leaned forward in his command chair. "Every ship we've given to allied species includes a human AI capable of managing singularity power systems, operating weapons platforms, and coordinating with other vessels. The organic crews are essentially passengers while our machines do the fighting." The implication struck Zefkar like a physical blow. Humanity hadn't just developed advanced technology. They had developed artificial intelligence advanced enough to operate that technology independently. The galaxy was facing not just human resistance, but human-created intelligences that could multiply their effective force far beyond what any organic species could achieve. "Sir," his tactical officer interrupted, "long-range sensors are detecting additional human vessels approaching our position. Current count is now over 60,000 ships." 60,000? Zefkar felt his legs weaken. "Where are they all coming from?" "Admiral." Chen's voice carried a note of sympathy. "I think it's time you understood the true scope of humanity's preparation for this day." The main display changed to show a three-dimensional map of the Sol system, Earth's home star system. What Zefkar saw defied everything his scouts had reported about human civilization. "Your intelligence reports described humanity as a single-world species with limited industrial capacity," Chen began. "That assessment was accurate 50 years ago, when we first detected Imperial expansion into this region of the galaxy." The display zoomed out, revealing massive industrial installations throughout the Sol system. Enormous shipyards orbited every major planet and moon. Asteroid belts had been completely mined out and converted into manufacturing platforms. Even the gas giants showed signs of massive resource extraction operations. "What you're seeing, Admiral, is the result of 50 years of total war preparation. Every human on Earth and throughout the Sol system has been working toward this single goal: building enough defensive capability to stop the Empire when it inevitably came for us." Dr. Martinez picked up the explanation. "We converted our entire civilization into a military-industrial complex. Every scientific breakthrough, every technological advance, every resource allocation decision was made with the goal of surviving Imperial conquest." The display showed production figures that made Zefkar's head spin. Humanity had built and equipped over 200,000 warships. They had created artificial intelligence systems numbering in the millions. They had stockpiled enough resources to sustain operations for decades without resupply. 200,000 ships? Zefkar asked weakly. "That's just our defensive fleet," Chen replied. "We've also produced approximately 50,000 vessels specifically designed for gift transfer to allied species, along with the AI systems needed to operate them effectively." "But why are you only showing 60,000 ships around our position?" Chen's expression became predatory again. "Because, Admiral, we didn't want to frighten you into making a rash decision. We wanted to give you every opportunity to choose wisdom over warfare." The tactical display updated to show the true scope of human forces in local space. Ships continued materializing around the Imperial fleet, appearing from nothing as their instantaneous transportation technology brought them into the battle zone. 60,000 became 70,000, then 80,000, then 100,000 vessels. "This is a demonstration, Admiral," Chen said quietly. "A fraction of our available forces, arranged to show you exactly how helpless your position truly is." Zefkar's bridge crew stood in stunned silence as they watched enough firepower to glass entire star systems continue to appear around their fleet. The tactical computers had stopped trying to calculate effective responses, simply displaying error messages as they were overwhelmed by the quantity of hostile contacts. "Sir," his weapons officer said in a voice barely above a whisper, "if even 1% of those ships opened fire simultaneously, they would vaporize our entire fleet in seconds." "General Chun," Zefkar said, surprised that his voice remained steady. "What do you want from me?" "The same thing we've wanted from the beginning, Admiral. We want you to leave. Take your fleet back to Imperial space, and explain to your superiors that the age of conquest is over." "And if I refuse?" Chin's expression didn't change, but somehow his presence seemed to fill the view screen. "Then, Admiral, you will discover exactly why no species in this galaxy has ever successfully conquered humanity once we decided to fight back." The energy readings from the human fleet spiked dramatically as weapons systems across 100,000 ships began charging to full power. The gravitational distortions created by their singularity power sources began interfering with the Imperial fleet's navigation systems. "Admiral," his engineering officer called out urgently, "the gravitational effect from their fleet are affecting our ship's structural integrity. If they increase power output any further, we'll begin experiencing hull stress fractures." "You have 15 minutes, Admiral," Chin said. "After that, we'll consider your continued presence in our space and act of war, and we'll respond accordingly." The transmission ended, leaving Zefkar alone with his thoughts and the impossible tactical situation surrounding his fleet. 100,000 human warships hung in space around his force like instruments of divine judgment, each one capable of destroying multiple Imperial vessels single-handedly. "Sir," his communications officer said quietly, "we're receiving a personal message from Fleet Commander Yexthal aboard the cruiser Stellar Dominance. He's requesting private communication." Fleet Commander Yexthal was Zefkar's oldest friend and most trusted subordinate. They had served together for over 2 centuries, fighting side by side through dozens of Imperial conquest campaigns. "Put him through, audio only." Zefkar, his friend's familiar voice came through the bridge speakers. "We need to talk." "I'm listening, old friend. I've been studying the tactical data from our sensors. This isn't a battle we can win. These humans have technology that makes our entire fleet obsolete. If we fight, we die. All of us." Zefkar looked around his bridge, seeing his officers listening to the conversation. Every face showed the same expression of grim understanding. "More importantly," Yexthal continued, "I've been listening to the communications from other Imperial fleets. The humans weren't exaggerating about the scope of their operations. The Empire is under attack across dozens of sectors simultaneously. Our logistics network is collapsing, our fleets are being overwhelmed, and our subject species are rising in rebellion." "What are you suggesting, Commander?" "I'm suggesting that we're watching the end of the Empire as we know it. The question is whether we die here as part of that ending, or whether we live to see what comes next." Zefkar closed his eyes and tried to think of his options. Imperial military doctrine provided no guidance for situations like this. The Empire had never faced an enemy this technologically advanced, this well-prepared, or this ruthless in their strategic planning. "Sir," his sensor operator called out, "the human fleet is moving into final attack positions. Energy readings suggest they're preparing to demonstrate their weapon capabilities." On the tactical display, the vast cloud of human vessels began shifting into perfectly coordinated formations. What had been a loose encirclement became a precise sphere of destruction with the Imperial fleet at its exact center. Every human ship was now in optimal firing position. "Admiral," General Chin's voice came through the bridge speakers, though his image didn't appear on screen. "You have 5 minutes to begin withdrawal procedures." Around him, Zefkar could feel his crew waiting for his decision. 300 years of military service, 300 years of Imperial victory, and expansion, all leading to this moment when the unstoppable force of the Empire met the immovable object of human determination. "Navigation," he said quietly. "Plot a course back to Imperial space." His navigation officer looked up in surprise. "Sir, you heard me, Navigator. Plot a withdrawal course to the nearest Imperial base. We're leaving. Yes, sir. As his crew began implementing withdrawal procedures, Admiral Zefkar opened a communication channel to the human fleet. General Chun, this is Admiral Zefkar. We are beginning withdrawal procedures. The Imperial fleet will depart your space within the hour. A wise decision, Admiral, Chen's voice replied. Your fleet will not be pursued or harassed during your withdrawal. General, one final question. Yes. What happens now? What happens to the Empire? There was a long pause before Chen answered. That depends on the Empire's response, Admiral. If Imperial leadership chooses to continue this conflict, then the Empire will be destroyed completely. But if they choose to accept the new reality of galactic politics, then perhaps something better can be built from what remains. And humanity? What are your intentions for the galaxy? We never wanted to conquer anyone, Admiral. We just wanted to be left alone. All we've ever asked for is the right to exist in peace, to raise our children, to build our civilization, to explore the stars on our own terms. Chen's voice carried a note of sadness. But the Empire made that impossible. So we did what humans have always done when our survival is threatened. We adapted, we prepared, and we fought back. Now the galaxy will have to adapt to us. The communication ended, and Admiral Zefkar stood on his bridge watching as 100,000 human warships gracefully moved aside to create a clear path back to Imperial space. Around him, his crew worked to prepare the fleet for withdrawal from what had become the most catastrophic defeat in Imperial history. Behind them, Earth continued its steady orbit around Sol, a blue marble that had just changed the fate of the galaxy forever. 6 months had passed since Admiral Zefkar returned to Imperial space with news that shattered 300 years of Imperial doctrine. The report he delivered to Supreme Admiral Vexhala, and the Imperial High Command had triggered the greatest crisis in the Empire's history. Zefkar stood once again on the bridge of the Eternal Dominion, but this time his ship was docked at Krylos Prime, the Empire's capital world. Through the massive viewport, he could see the once mighty Imperial fleet yards, now operating at a fraction of their former capacity. The galaxy-wide rebellion that humanity had triggered was devastating Imperial forces on dozens of fronts. Admiral, his communications officer announced, the Imperial Council is ready for your final briefing. Zefkar straightened his dress uniform and prepared to deliver what would likely be the most important speech of his career. The Empire's leadership had spent 6 months debating how to respond to the human threat, while their forces continued to suffer defeats across the galaxy. The Council Chamber on Krylos Prime was a vast amphitheater designed to showcase Imperial power and majesty. Representatives from over 200 species sat in tiered rows, while the Imperial High Command occupied positions on a raised platform at the center. Today, however, the usual displays of wealth and power felt hollow, overshadowed by the reports of military disasters streaming in from across the Empire. Supreme Admiral Vexhala called the session to order. Admiral Zefkar, you have requested permission to address the full Imperial Council regarding the current crisis. You may proceed. Zefkar walked to the center of the chamber, feeling the eyes of the galaxy's most powerful beings focused upon him. For a moment, he thought about all the conquered species represented in this chamber, all the worlds that had been forced to submit to Imperial rule. Then he thought about the blue world called Earth and the species that had refused to submit. Honored council members, he began. 6 months ago, I led the largest invasion fleet in Imperial history to conquer a single world. Today, I stand before you to report that this mission was not merely a failure. It was the beginning of the end of the Empire as we know it. Murmurs of protest arose from the assembled representatives, but Vexhala silenced them with a gesture. The species we encountered, humanity, had spent 50 years preparing for our arrival. They had studied our tactics, compromised our intelligence networks, and developed technology that renders our entire military doctrine obsolete. Zefkar activated the chamber's holographic display system, showing real-time data from across the Empire. Red indicators marked systems under attack, Yellow indicators showed supply line disruptions, and green indicators represented fully Imperial-controlled space. There was far too much red and yellow on the display. As you can see, humanity's strategy was not limited to defending their homeworld. They have coordinated simultaneous rebellions on over 400 Imperial worlds. They have provided advanced military technology to every resistance movement in the galaxy. Most critically, they have demonstrated that Imperial conquest is not inevitable. Emperor Talvashar, the ancient ruler of the Empire, spoke from his position at the apex of the council chamber. His voice carried the weight of 1,000 years of absolute authority. Admiral, you speak of rebellion as though it were something new. The Empire has faced resistance before. We have always overcome it through the application of superior force. Your Majesty, Zefkar replied respectfully, this is different. Previous resistance movements were isolated, technologically inferior, and fighting alone. Humanity has connected every resistance movement in the galaxy. They share intelligence, coordinate strategies, and, most importantly, they now possess technology superior to our own. He gestured to the holographic display, zooming in on specific sectors. In the Outer Rim territories, the Zalani Confederation has successfully liberated 17 star systems using human-provided weaponry. In the core worlds, the Vorthak Underground has destroyed 3 Imperial fleet bases using human transportation technology. In the border sectors, 12 different species have formed the Free World Alliance and are systematically driving our forces from their territories. The chamber erupted in angry voices as council members shouted questions and demand for action. Vexhala restored order, but Zefkar could see the fear in her eyes. Admiral, she said, what do you recommend? How do we respond to this threat? Zefkar had spent 6 months considering this question, 6 months watching Imperial forces suffer defeat after defeat against enemies they had once dominated easily. His answer would determine the fate of billions of beings across the galaxy. Supreme Admiral, I recommend that we negotiate an immediate ceasefire with humanity and begin discussions for a complete restructuring of Imperial governance. The silence that followed was deafening. For several long seconds, no one in the chamber moved or spoke. Finally, Emperor Talvashar rose from his throne, his ancient form radiating barely controlled fury. You suggest that the Empire surrender to a single species from an insignificant world. No, Your Majesty. I suggest that we acknowledge reality before reality destroys us entirely. Zefkar turned to address the full council. The Empire was built on the assumption that we could conquer and control any species we encountered. That assumption is no longer valid. Humanity has proven that sufficiently advanced technology, combined with strategic patience and coordinated resistance, can defeat even our greatest military forces. He paused, looking around the chamber at representatives of species that had once been free before Imperial conquest. More importantly, they have taught every other species in the galaxy that resistance is possible. That Imperial conquest is not the natural order of the universe. That freedom is worth fighting for, regardless of the odds. Then, we will crush them all, Emperor Talvashar declared. We will mobilize every ship, every soldier, every resource the Empire possesses. We will show the galaxy what happens to those who defy Imperial authority. Your Majesty, Zefkar said quietly, we've tried that approach. Every time we escalate our military response, humanity escalates theirs. When we sent reinforcements, they attacked our supply lines. When we mobilized additional fleets, they provided better technology to our enemies. When we attempted total war, they demonstrated that they can coordinate resistance across the entire galaxy simultaneously. The Admiral activated new displays showing the current state of Imperial forces. We have lost 30% of our total fleet strength. Our logistics networks are in complete collapse. Over half of our subject species are in active rebellion. Our industrial capacity has been reduced by 60% due to attacks on manufacturing facilities. He looked directly at the Emperor. Your Majesty, We are losing this war. Not slowly, not gradually, but catastrophically. Every day we continue fighting, more Imperial worlds fall to the rebellion. Every day we refuse to negotiate. Humanity provides more advanced technology to our enemies. Emperor Tal Vasher's expression darkened. Then, what would you have us do, Admiral? Abandon 1,000 years of Imperial expansion? Surrender the greatest civilization in galactic history to a pack of rebellious primitives? I would have us survive, Your Majesty. And perhaps, in surviving, learn to build something better than what we had before. Zefkar turned to address the full council again. Honored representatives, many of you were conquered by the Empire. Your worlds were occupied, your population subjugated, your culture suppressed. But you survived Imperial rule, and your species adapted to serve the Empire's needs. He paused, letting his words sink in. Now, I ask you to consider this. What if the Empire itself could adapt? What if, instead of ruling through conquest and oppression, we learn to lead through cooperation and mutual benefit? You speak of weakness, Vexhala interjected. The Empire's strength has always been its unity of purpose and chain of command. Without absolute authority, the Empire would fragment into chaos. Perhaps, Supreme Admiral, but consider the alternative. If we continue this war, the Empire will be destroyed entirely. Every world will be lost, every fleet will be defeated, and every species will be free to pursue its own destiny. Zefkar activated a final display showing projected outcomes based on current trends. According to our strategic analysis, the Empire has approximately 18 months of operational capability remaining before complete military collapse. After that, we will have no fleets, no territory, and no authority to negotiate anything. The chamber fell silent as the council members absorbed the implications of his words. The greatest empire in galactic history was dying, brought down by a single species that had refused to accept the inevitability of conquest. However, Zefkar continued, if we begin negotiations immediately, there is still time to preserve something from what we have built. Humanity has indicated they are willing to discuss terms for a peaceful transition to a new form of galactic governance. What kind of terms? Emperor Tal Vasher asked suspiciously. Freedom for all conquered species that desire independence. Reparations for species that suffered under Imperial occupation. Democratic representation for all species in a new galactic confederation. And, most importantly, absolute prohibition on conquest and forced subjugation of any species. The Emperor's laugh was harsh and bitter. They want us to dismantle everything we are. No, Your Majesty. They want us to become something better than what we were. Zefkar looked around the chamber one last time. Honored Council, 6 months ago, I believed that the Empire was invincible. I believed that our military might and technological superiority guaranteed our dominance over the galaxy. I was wrong. Humanity has shown us that there are things more powerful than weapons and warships. Things like unity, determination, and the refusal to accept oppression as natural law. He straightened to attention. I recommend that we contact General Chen immediately and begin negotiations for a peaceful transition. The age of empire is ending, but the age of what comes next has yet to be determined. We can help shape that future, or we could be destroyed by it. The choice is ours. The silence stretched for long minutes as the most powerful beings in the galaxy contemplated the end of their civilization. Finally, Emperor Tal Vasher spoke. Admiral Zefkar, you have served the Empire faithfully for 3 centuries. Your assessment of our situation is noted. The Imperial Council will consider your recommendations. As the session ended and the council members filed out, Zefkar remained in the chamber, staring at the tactical displays that showed the Empire's continuing collapse. Outside, the stars continued to shine on a galaxy where a small blue world had changed everything, and where humanity's refusal to surrender had given hope to every oppressed species among the stars. 3 days later, The first peace negotiations between the Empire and humanity began on a neutral space station at the edge of Imperial territory. Admiral Zeph Carr served as the Empire's primary representative, carrying with him the weight of 1,000 years of history and the hope for a future where conquest was replaced by cooperation. The galaxy would never be the same, but perhaps, he thought as he prepared to meet with General Chen again, it would be something better.